Hey everyone, welcome to Round the Horn. Today's guest is Pro Scout for the Chicago Cubs, Billy Blitzer. Hello, Billy. How are you?
Hey Lee, how you doing today?
Lots of trophies there.
I have plenty of stuff.
It's like the TV commercial. It's a big house. How are you going to keep it clean? A
Yeah, what you gonna do? It's a lot of dust
lot
collectors.
of dust collecting. I got the same problem here. Okay, great. We're good right now. Well, we could be out on the field today, but unfortunately, with the situation the way it is, it's a little difficult.
Well, this is my 45th year scouting, and it's the first time in my entire career I haven't been at the ballpark this year.
Oh my goodness. So I guess let's give some people who don't know who you are, a lot of viewers that are just getting used to our program. Who exactly are you, Mr. Blitzer?
Well, I'm a longtime scout, baseball scout, I like to say. I have scouted for 45 years. My last 38 with the Chicago Cubs, so you're wearing a nice outfit there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And my first 7 years, I started with the Major League Scouting Bureau. So 7 years with the Scouting Bureau, 4 as an associate, 3 as a part-time scout. And then the Cubs hired me in 1982 as a full-time scout. I was an amateur scout for many years. In the last 10 years, the last 10 years, I've been on the pro side, meaning I scout major league teams and minor league teams for trades. As you just saw yesterday was a trade deadline.
Right, exactly. We did pretty good in the trades.
We did okay. We filled some needs, and we'll
Yeah,
see what happens. You never know.
I really like Mayben. He was great with the Yankees, and I'm glad we got him.
Well, we'll see. Like I said, you don't want to say too much, and
I
then it
know. You'll
comes up
jinx
in the
it
face.
all.
I don't want to jinx it.
So you have not been able to go to a ballpark.
No, no. I've been doing all my work off the television. I had 3 clubs to do. I had the Pittsburgh Pirates, Cincinnati Reds, and Chicago White Sox, and I've watched the games on TV, and I filed reports on every one of those players.
Oh my
It
goodness.
has, it does have its benefits, though. I do miss going to the ballpark. I really do. But the benefits are, if you have to go to the restroom, you don't have to wait online.
That's right.
If you want to go to concession stand, same thing. Walk to my refrigerator, and then
Yeah.
when the game ends, you always see the scouts running out of the ballpark for their cars to get out and beat the traffic. All I do is shut off the TV. I don't have to worry about it.
That's amazing.
Uh,
Well, you're close to Nathan's. I remember going to Nathan's with you doing our winter meetings, quote unquote. So you could actually go get a hot dog
oh
within
well,
walking distance.
I walk on the boardwalk pretty much every day. It's about 1.3 miles from my home. So I walk
Okay.
on the boardwalk. I go past Nathan's pretty much every day.
The greatest hot dogs in the world,
Yes,
and
they
French
are.
fries too. We get them in the store, but I tell everybody they're not the same as if you're going to the original place.
Well, you got to remember all the grease on the grills all these
That's
years.
right. Over the years, they're seasoned.
They're ready.
So these days, since you have to watch via television, and it's kind of like what we do too. I mean, I subscribe to MLB TV, so I get to choose whoever I want to watch whenever I want to watch. But it's a little difficult because you're sometimes you're screaming at your iPad most of the time about things that are going right and things that are going wrong.
Well, you miss different aspects of the game as a scout. I mean, we can only see whatever the television camera is going to show you.
Right.
And we miss, let's say, a player's instincts, how he breaks on a ball in the outfield, and we'll miss some throws from the outfield or an infielder doing certain things, or pick off throws over to first base. There's a lot of little things. Plus, as a scout, you watch how a player reacts, a pitcher, when things aren't going good. And you see when he walks back into the dugout, and you can look into the dugout and see if they're throwing something, or, they keep their emotions under their hat. So we miss things, but we're getting the job done. That's all I can say.
In some cases, it might be a little easier to do it that way as opposed to being at the ballpark, but it's could be the best of both worlds sometimes.
Well, you get to see the picture pretty good because when you're in the stands, sometimes a place like Yankee Stadium, we sit very far back. We're behind the plate. We're on that second tier, and
Right,
you're further back, and you really can't see movement. And you have people getting up and walking up and down the aisles and things like that. That's distracting. But so you get a better view from the TV with something like that. So and also you can see the hitters pretty good, from the television.
right,
So
sure,
you have everything to work with.
right, exactly. Well, talking about scouting, you and I, you had introduced me at one time to one of the greatest guys in the game, Mr. Ralph DeLulo. Tell us a little bit how you got started with Ralph.
Well, Ralph, as everybody knew, I was his protege. He was my mentor. What happened was Ralph, ironically, had worked for the Cubs for 25 years. And I think it was 1975 or 1974, the Major League Scouting Bureau came into existence. And believe it or not, they had a draft of scouts the way a team would draft players. And each team was allowed to protect 5 scouts. So there weren't a lot of young scouts in those years. Mostly were older men. And I guess if you were past a certain age or whatever, a team didn't protect someone like Ralph or Lenny Marullo. They were on the older side, and they weren't one of the 5. So the Major League Scouting Bureau took from the Cubs Ralph DeLulo, and he worked New Jersey, New York. Lenny Marullo, who was the shortstop for the 1945 Cubs in the World Series, worked New England for the Chicago Cubs, and he was selected by the Bureau. So you had 2 experienced scouts here in the Northeast. Well, that first year, I was attending Hunter College in New York City, and I was coaching a Sandlot team in the Parade Grounds Youth Service, which has become a very big organization as far as producing major league players. Sean Dunston, Manny Ramirez, right now, Dylan Betances, Adam Ottavino, they're alumni from this youth service
Wow,
organization.
that's great.
So I happened to be coaching. I knew I wasn't going to be a professional baseball player. So I asked some of the guys on the Hunter College team if they knew of any organization that might need a coach. I'd like to try coaching because I always liked baseball and I thought I had pretty good knowledge of the game. And they told me about this new organization that had just started in the Parade Grounds, maybe the year before, that they might need coaches. So I went down and I met Herb Zitter, Mel Zitter's dad. Mel's been running it all these years,
Right.
and he gave me a team to coach. Well, it was my second year coaching. It was high school kids. Uh, the second year I was coaching there, I was in the Parade Grounds, and this old man, that was Ralph DeLulo. And when I say old man, I'm probably older than Ralph was then, I am now, but I say old man because to me he was old. And he just happened to sit down next to me, and we just started to chat, and we're watching the game. And there was a game going on, and this left-handed young kid gets up, and I happen to say to him, watch this kid, he's going to be a real good player. And the kid hits a triple, and he flies around the bases, and he looks at me, and he says, how do you know him? Now, the kid that was Dallas Williams, who 2 years later was a first-round pick by the Baltimore Orioles. And the reason I knew Dallas, I grew up playing in the schoolyard in Brighton Beach. Dallas was one of the kids. He was younger than us, but we used to let him play with us because he was a real good athlete. So I knew Dallas. So Ralph says to me, well, what are you doing here? I said, I'm coaching the next game. So he says to me, well, I'm going to watch. I said, I don't care. You can watch. And he watches the game. And when the game's over, I was packing the equipment. And Ralph comes over to me on the other side of the fence and he says, I'd like to talk to you. I said, about what? So he says to me, well, my name is Ralph DeLulo. I'm a scout with the Major League Scouting Bureau. And I said, what's that? Because it was the first year of the Bureau and I had no idea and nobody knew what that
You
was.
knew, right.
So he explained it to me that they didn't represent all the clubs then. They represented most of them. The Phillies, the Dodgers, the Cincinnati Reds, they were not part of the Bureau. So they represented I think, 28 clubs. They represented like 22 clubs or something like that. So I said to him then, oh, you want to talk to me about my shortstop? Because my shortstop ended up playing in the major leagues. His name was Willie Lozado, and he got a cup of coffee with the Milwaukee Brewers later on. He said, no, I want to talk to you about you. I said, me? I didn't play. You know, a scout wants to talk to you about players. What are you talking to the coach for? You know? So he says, I want to talk to you about you. He says to me, give me your phone number. I'm going to call you during the week, and you're going to tell me when you're going to play next weekend. I'm going to come down. You're going to sit with me, and we're going to watch a game together. And I said, why? And he says, don't worry, why. Just give me your phone number. I'll call. So, you know, in New York City here, you know, this is Brooklyn. You got a lot of characters running around.
Exactly.
So I went home and I told my parents. I said, I don't know if this guy's telling me the truth or what, but Ralph did call me. And on that next Saturday, I met him at the parade grounds. He came down before the game. We sat there and he started pointing things out to me. And as I was sitting there, people walking by saying hello or whatever to me, because I knew everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
Ralph then turns to me and he says, okay, I'm going to run a tryout camp here in the parade grounds in Brooklyn. He says, but you're going to set it up. You know all the players. You're going to bring all the players in. And because it was the first year of the Bureau, Ralph ran, I think, about 4 camps in New Jersey, and he ran 2 more in Long Island. So he said to me, you're going to come around with me and help me run these tryout camps. And that's how I got started. And I got to meet all the scouts. And I started when I was in college. So I was an associate for him for 4 years. And then the Bureau hired me. You know, as a part-time scout, I had New York City and Long Island and Westchester. And then I was building a reputation because in those years with the Bureau, I came up with Bobby Bonilla and Devon White, and Johnny Franco was here from Brooklyn. I knew John. And Viola was over at St. John's. And B.J. Surhoff was up in Rye, New York, and Walter Weiss was in Suffern. So I'm coming up with some pretty good names. And a lot of scouts wouldn't come into New York City in those years. You know, New York City was a tough place, so they'd come in packs. And now I'm starting to come up with these players, and the scouting directors told these scouts, you better get into New York. This kid's coming up with players. So I built a reputation, and when Dallas Green came over to the Chicago Cubs, you know, they needed somebody because they were going with Ralph's reports. And Gary Nichols had come in 1982, the year with Dunston. And I was still with the Bureau in the June draft of that. But Sean was a youth service kid, and believe it or not, he was my bat boy. Mel Zitter and I taught him how to play. So we knew the family, and the Chicago Cubs sent a letter to the Major League Scouting Bureau asking for permission for me to go in with Gary Nichols to sign Sean Dunston. So that's how I was involved with that, even though I was not with the Cubs in the spring of '82. They hired me in the fall of '82.
That's a great story. It's a great story. I remember sitting with Ralph at one of the tryouts, and you know, there's just like so much knowledge in that one man that it was just tremendously unbelievable. I'll tell you a quick story. I called Ralph one time, you know, on the 800 number and left a message. Of course, he didn't answer his phone then. And then he calls me back, and one of the greatest things that I can remember about Ralph and what he would tell you was he called me a good baseball man.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was the ultimate compliment that anybody could get in the game. And especially coming from him, it was just, you know, I remember it to this day. And he was just a great guy, that's for sure.
Well, Ralph was always very positive. And one of the very first things he always taught me, he was always, like I said, positive. And one of the things he said to me was, always tell me what a player can do. Don't tell me what he can't do. Look for the good in them. That's
Right.
how you find players. And he was right. I mean, I could tell you so many stories with Ralph, but really, he was a legendary scout. He signed players, but more so, he was a great human being. I mean, and that's really the greatest compliment you can pay him.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll tell you a quick story about Walt Weiss. You bring up his name, and Walt and I had met actually when I was working at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, the nightclub. He comes in with a friend of mine that he played in college with. In fact, his college team was unbelievable. It was North Carolina. They had B.J. Surhoff. they had Walt and a guy that I knew that played around this area, Mike Jaziniak, who was probably the toughest out I have ever played against. And I think the reason why he didn't get drafted was because he had broken his thumb or something like that late in the season. So he never got drafted. But after that all healed, he played in summer ball and everything. It was really tough. So anyway, I know Mike, and we were setting up on a Sunday afternoon in the wintertime for a benefit concert. And in walks these three guys, one of which I knew, Mike Jaziniak. He says, can we help you? You know, we come down to see the show tonight and wanted to get tickets and everything. I said, oh, yeah, come on in. And I said, there's nothing really for you guys to do if you want to call up, get a pizza, and watch the, football on TV. So later on that night, he introduces me to his friends, and one of which was Rookie of the Year, Walt Weiss. So we stayed in touch over the years, and I even have one of his photos here that he signed. But he did such a great thing for me. My father was sick out in California. He was having heart surgery, and Walt went to visit him and really lifted up his spirits and everything, gave him an autograph photo and everything. So that's my little story about Walt Weiss.
Well, I was the scout that came up with him.
Yeah. And a great ball player. Absolutely. Great ball player and a good human being. So, we've got those things in common. I know Ralph got tons of people started in the game. And,
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And found so many great players. I mean, who were some of the players that he signed?
Well, his two big ones, he signed Bruce Sutter.
Right.
He found him at the York tournament, the Labor Day tournament there. He signed him for $1,000. Yeah, and he signed Joe Negro.
Oh, wow.
And Ralph always told me that he had Sandy Koufax, believe it or not.
Okay.
But the Cubs wouldn't give him the money then to sign him. He used to do that all the time. Yeah. But I'll tell you a great story with Ralph. You talk about, he knew everybody. And when I first met him, he would tell me he knew this one, he knew that one. And I used to say, yeah. I don't know if I should believe him or not. It's like today, I pretty much know everybody, But Ralph, when I worked for him as an associate, he'd give me some expense money because I wasn't getting paid. And as a reward at the end of the year, he took me to the Scouts dinner, the New York Pro Scouts, but he took me the first time to the New York Sports Writers dinner. And this was a big thing. In those years, you had to wear a tuxedo.
Right.
And before the dinner, there used to be a big cocktail hour. And you had to know somebody to get in. But Ralph knew the person at the door. He says, you're going to meet me at the hotel, and we're going to go to this cocktail hour first. And in that particular year, Jim Bunning was being honored. And Ralph tells me as we were going up the escalator to this cocktail hour, Jim Bunning's supposed to be here. I hope he's in the cocktail hour. I know him real well. So I said, Ralph, how do you know him? He said, I was his first manager in the minor leagues. Because Ralph, before he worked for the Cubs, he was a manager, I think, in the Tigers system. And that's where Jim Bunning originally came from.
Sure, yeah.
So we walked through the doors into this huge room. Jim Bunning was on the other side of the room talking to some people. And as soon as we came into the room, he spotted Ralph, stopped who he was talking to, ran across the room, threw his arms around him and said, hey, Skip, hey, Skip. And after that, I believed everything he ever told me.
Talk about cocktail hours. I'll tell you, I don't know if I told you this story or not, but you remember the year that Tommy Lasorda was the guest speaker.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
To me, that was one of the funniest Scouts dinners that ever happened. It was like a comedy act, but I was married at the time and took my father-in-law to the dinner. And what do you do after 3 hours in the car driving to Long Island? You stop at the men's room before you go into the cocktail hour. So guess who's in there?
Yeah, Tommy.
Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, Ralph wasn't doing too well. We're washing our hands and Lasorda's right there. And I said, Mr. Lasorda, I'd like to introduce myself. And, I'm a, friend of Ralph's, and he got me started, and, yourself as well. And he says, oh, I heard Ralph's not doing too good. I said, yeah, he's if you get a chance, maybe you can give him a call sometime. So we kind of a little chat there. And I say, and let me introduce you to my father-in-law, Nick D'Amico. So Lasorda says to me, the best thing you ever did was marry an Italian.
There you go.
So we're laughing and everything. And we go outside the restroom, and he gets mobbed by tons of people looking for his autograph and a picture and everything. So we head over to the cocktail hour, which was in another room. So we're walking down, we're about 50 yards away, and all of a sudden, I hear a voice yelling, yeah, the best thing you ever did was marry an Italian.
Well, that's Tommy.
It was Lasorda screaming at me.
Well, I'll tell you, before Tommy Lasorda managed, he used to run around with Ralph in Pennsylvania. Tommy scouted.
I heard that.
And Ralph and him used to run around together, because when I first went to my very first organization meeting with the Bureau, Ralph says to me, before we fly to Arizona for the meeting, let's go out a couple of days early and go to Los Angeles. Let's go see the Dodgers play. And he took me to Dodger Stadium. It's the only time I've ever been there. And before we went in to see BP, he takes me up to the office, and the general manager was Al Campanis. And he takes me into the office because he knows Campanis, and he tells him I'm from Brooklyn. And of course, he was in Brooklyn, you know, with the Dodgers.
Sure.
So now we go down to watch BP, and we're looking around and we don't see Lasorda. So Ralph yells to some player on the field, and it was Jay Johnstone. Hey, where's Lasorda? So he says, he's in the clubhouse. Now, there's no fans in the stands. It's just us, you know, a couple of stuff. So Ralph says to him, hey, go get him. So Johnstone looks at him like, who are you? He said, just tell him the Jet is here, because that was his nickname, the Jet.
Yes, right, sure.
So Johnstone looks at him, and he said, okay. He goes up the runway back to the clubhouse. So I turned to Ralph and said, he's not going to know who it is. You tell him the Jet is here. He goes, he'll know. Next thing you know, Johnstone comes out and he says he's on his way. As we're sitting there in the seats in the stands, you hear Lasorda's voice coming down the tunnel. Hey, Ralphie, where are you? You know exactly who it was.
Exactly. Lasorda is such a funny guy, and he's getting on in years, but he's still going to games. I see him.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Now they got his photo on a placard sitting in the stands since he can't be in person.
Okay.
But that was a funny thing. I tell that story a lot, and people they're amazed about Tommy Lasorda. And in fact, even just before he stopped managing, he was still throwing BP.
Oh, yeah. And you know, he goes to a lot of dinners. He has his whole routine. He tells the same jokes over and over again.
It was a comedy act, that's for sure. And I know the punchline was, and I ain't making this up.
Yeah, I know. I was there.
I wish somebody had recorded that, because it would have been the greatest thing since Casey Stengel.
Well, I'll tell you, that night, I thought he was leaving because people were lined up to get his autograph.
Right.
And I saw him going out, and I ran over and thanked him. I was packing up. And he says, no, I'm just going to the restroom. Tell everybody to stay here. Do you know he signed every autograph that night? He would not leave until he signed the last autograph, and I thanked him. I'll never forget that night.
Oh, amazing, amazing man. Well, Billy, we're running out of time, unfortunately. We could talk for hours and hours and hours, but thank you very much for taking some time out of your day and spending some time with us.
No problem, Lee. It was great being here, and I want to thank you for all the years that you've helped me out in South Jersey when I was an amateur scout. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure, that's for sure. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Take care.